Welcome to another explainer from Forge College. Today, we are mapping out what is honestly an intricate but completely fascinating engineering blueprint. We're going to trace the epic, behind-the-scenes hero's journey of a single transaction on the network. We'll follow it from the exact moment of its birth on your device, all the way to being etched into the blockchain's history forever.
To set the stage here, let's think back to our previous lesson where we covered the overview of Solana's architecture. Now that system is optimized for absolute light speed, maximum throughput. But today we're shifting gears. We're looking at the methodical, rugged, peer-to-peer reality of Bitcoin's network plumbing. It is a completely different beast, and understanding how these specific messages flow through this specific network is absolutely critical to understanding why it's so secure.
So here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, wallet creation. Second, the gossip protocol. Third, the mempool bouncer. Fourth, miners and blocks. And finally, propagation risks. Let's dive right in.
Part 1. Wallet creation and signatures.
Okay, so every great journey begins at home, right? For our transaction, home is your wallet software. This is the starting point where you decide you want to send some Bitcoin, and the software silently goes to work constructing a digital message. The very first thing your wallet has to do is gather the raw ingredients. In this system, we call these UTXOs, which stands for unspent transaction outputs. Simply put, these are the unspent chunks of Bitcoin just sitting in your wallet waiting to be used as inputs. When you want to send a payment, your wallet selects these specific chunks to build a new transaction. It's literally exactly like reaching into your pocket and finding the right combination of dollar bills and quarters to pay for coffee.
But here is the catch. You can't just claim those UTXOs and spend them without absolute proof. And that brings us to cryptographic signatures. These are essentially the ultimate VIP pass for authorization. I always like to say, this signature proves mathematically that you have the true right to spend that UTXO. Because without this VIP pass, the network won't even acknowledge you. You can show up to the club, but if you don't have the pass, the bouncers are going to pretend you don't even exist. Which brings us to part 2, the gossip protocol in action.
So your wallet has built the transaction and signed it with that shiny VIP pass. Now it's time to leave the house. The wallet broadcasts it out into the vast, decentralized peer-to-peer network. Nodes out there actually talk to each other to spread your message, but, and this is key, they don't just blindly shout the full, heavy transaction data at every single peer. Doing that would spam the network and crash it instantly. Instead, they use this incredibly polite two-step handshake. It starts with an IM, or inventory message. It's basically tapping a neighbor on the shoulder and saying, hey, I have something new. If the receiving node hasn't seen it yet, it replies with getdata, which just means, okay, send me the full details. It's a super elegant way to prevent redundant transfers.
To really visualize how this spreads, you can think of network propagation like dropping colored dye into a flowing river. If you have great connectivity, dropping that transaction into the network is like dropping the dye right where the current is fast and turbulent. It disperses widely and uniformly in a matter of seconds. But if you're poorly connected, well, it's kind of like dropping that dye into a stagnant, isolated puddle on the riverbank. It is going to take a lot longer for the rest of the network to even realize your transaction exists.
All right, part 3, the mempool bouncer.
Our transaction hitched a ride on the gossip protocol and successfully arrived at a node. But hold your horses, it is not confirmed yet. It now faces the strict nightclub bouncer of the network, the mempool. Now let's clear up a massive misconception right now. The mempool is a node's local holding area for unconfirmed transactions. I really want to emphasize that word local. There is absolutely no single giant global mempool floating in the sky that everyone shares. None. Instead, there are tens of thousands of individual localized waiting rooms, and every single node applies its own independent rules to manage its own room.
So how do you actually get past this velvet rope? Well, the mempool bouncer uses an exact, uncompromising checklist to decide if your transaction gets accepted locally. Step 1. Check those cryptographic signatures. Is the VIP pass perfectly valid? Step 2. Verify the UTXOs are actually unspent in this specific node's view of history. Step 3. Check the fee rate limits. Are you paying enough in transaction fees to be worth taking up their limited memory space? And Step 4. Ensure no conflicts exist with any other transactions they've already let in. Pass all 4 of those checks, and you finally get to wait inside.
Moving on to part 4, miners and block inclusion.
Now this is where transactions finally transition from just floating around in those local waiting rooms to being permanently cemented in history. Miners are the specialized nodes that make this happen.
And we have to remember, miners are completely economically driven. When they're assembling a new candidate block, they look at their local mempool and cherry-pick transactions based on the highest fee per vbyte. They want to squeeze the most lucrative, highest-paying transactions into the limited physical space of the next block to maximize their own revenue. It is pure free market dynamics at work. Once a miner actually includes your transaction in a valid block, boom, you get your first confirmation. And as it's often said, confirmation reduces double spend risk dramatically. In fact, digging into these localized mempool policies and understanding exactly how confirmation dynamics secure the network, that's exactly what students in Forge College programs spend a lot of time analyzing, because it really is the absolute bedrock of trust in Web3.
And finally, Part 5, Risks of Slow Networks.
But what happens when things don't go perfectly? Let's look at the darker side of this journey. What happens when our transaction gets stuck in network traffic or dropped in that stagnant puddle we talked about earlier? Well, different propagation speeds directly impact security. If we break down the scenarios, in a fast relay, miner visibility is high, and the double spend risk is practically zero. But in a slow or partition relay, only a minority of miners ever even see the transaction. That slow speed creates a fragmented awareness across the network. Some nodes see one reality, others see absolutely nothing. That fragmentation delays confirmations and opens up a very dangerous time window for attackers to attempt double spends.
One of the complex ways this plays out is through something called RBF, or replace by fee. This is the deliberate act of supplanting an earlier unconfirmed transaction with a brand new version carrying a higher fee. If the network is partitioned and moving slowly, you can literally have competing transactions fighting for miners' attention based purely on whoever pays the most. Different miners see different versions, and the ultimate winner is just determined by which version reaches the most hashing power first.
So, if we boil this whole hero's journey down, there are three main takeaways you've got to remember. First, separate authorization from visibility. A perfectly valid VIP pass does not guarantee the network will quickly see your transaction. Second, fees plus connectivity equals miner selection. You need a competitive fee rate and wide propagation to get picked. And third, propagation delays create exploit windows. In this network, speed quite literally is security.
Which leaves us with a pretty massive cliffhanger. If propagation delays create these dangerous exploit windows, how do honest nodes systematically detect and reject a malicious double spend before it's too late? Well, that involves deterministic consensus rules, and that is exactly what we are going to tackle in our next explainer. Until then, I highly encourage you to head over to forge.college to continue learning about these Web3 fundamentals and so much more. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep exploring, and I'll catch you in the next one.